finally this week we're going to have a look at this and the Oris Divers Date Watches. And I guess my more overriding question is what has happened to Oris? Because it feels like they've gone from being the darling of the geek watch industry to like just being also rans. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just me, or maybe it's a wider problem. But this is the new range of Oris divers, which yeah, they just look like the way they look. There's not really a lot to say about them. Uh, there's nothing too standoutish for me, so let's see if that's reflected in how you guys vote. Is this new range from Oris or this refresh a hit, a miss, or a maybe? 1, 2, 3, go. Miss, maybes, hit, maybes. David, talk to us about Oris and this watch in particular.
That's probably the toughest question this morning. If you like this sort of watch, or if you like Oris or whatever, clearly they have put effort into an update, which I can respect. That is cool. It's quite slim. It's boring and unique at the same time, which is also quite rare in a way. The proportions are very much its own thing. I like the bracelet with the thin veneer on the side. So it has quirky little elements here and there that to me conveys effort, and I respect that. I'm not a fan of the watch itself, but that's more of a tasting.
Mm. Ripley, thoughts on Oris on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a very exciting release, but it what they did with the Divers 65, which I guess is now just the Divers, is kind of what they did with the Aquas earlier this year. It's a generational update. It's a all around more refined, updated, improved watch. But it's not reinventing the wheel. So when you look at the new Aquases, it kind of looks just like the old Aquas at a first glance. You see them side by side. You see they've done a lot, and it's not very obvious, but it's a lot that translates to a more refined experience, whether that's thinner links, better taper, better geometry, thinner case, and all of that. So this is very much that. I wouldn't be selling my Diver 65 to pick up one of these. Certainly it's very, very similar, but the Diver 65 had been around for a while. They'd made it in honestly an uncountable number of iterations and sizes and materials by this point. So this is very much a generational update. It's not exciting. You can get similar-ish watches from brands like Nevada, Volcane, any of those kind of retro skin diver styles. But this one does a few things that are unique. It is more expensive than the outgoing generation, even for the Solita based ones, which is kind of where I think the value proposition that used to be for the Diver 65 kind of falls short. But there's very little to object to about it. It's not exciting at all. I don't think it's necessarily a value proposition, but it's a good looking vintage inspired dive watch from a solid brand, and you know that's kind of the long and short on it.
Kevin, 2,450 Swiss francs. How did you
I
vote?
voted a hit. I mean, it's been a while. It's always needed an update for the past couple of years, and I'm glad they've done that design tweaks on the new variation. They still haven't sorted out the date wheel color match, but never mind. Maybe the next generation they'll get onto that
One of these
one of these
days.
days, exactly. But going back to your question about have they lost their way? Um, I think that they have. I mean, I struggle with them, even though I love the brand. And full disclosure, I do run the Oris Social Club for London, and I'm a big fan.
Oh, are you about to get chucked out? Well, they're not going to let me in now after I said that.
But the fact that they still have their in-house movement as well as the space and the Salita, and you come across certainly on the Aquis range, you got one at 2.5 and one at £4,000. Why would you buy the cheaper one? I know the in-house one's got 10-year warranty and all the rest of it, and it's a better movement. But the person on the street is not going to spend that sort of money. I think they need to make a decision and discontinue the Salitas and just have it on the Aquis or on the Diver 65s, and so there's a distinctive differential between the brands and the ranges, so the movements stick with them. I just
But at that point, Oris is going toe to toe with Omega
Yes.
entry level
Yeah.
pieces, and they're more expensive than
Tudor. Yeah,
Tudor.
I know.
At this point, I feel like they can't abandon the Salida stuff entirely, because it puts them into a price point that's dominated by like big blue chip luxury manufacturers that you see in airports. Tag, So $4,000, that's not an insignificant amount. We're a stone's throw away from an entry level Rolex.
Well, if you can get a Rolex, of course, but that's a separate matter.
They're definitely, I would think, being squashed from both sides. My feeling about this is it's an updated watch that feels like if you were to put the old one and this one side by side, you'd think that this was the older one. It feels like it's, I don't know. It just yeah. Anyway, that's how I feel about it. Ariel, what do you think?
I think that because this watch is so much more expensive than what people originally were excited about with the Oris Diver 65, this is no longer called the 65, it's just a diver, that it's lost really the reason for why people are excited about it. In all other regards, it's basically like a Toyota Camry of watches. Like, okay, it's perfectly adequate, but nobody buys the Camry for top dollar. They buy it because it's good and cheap. This Oris might be good. It's no longer cheap. It's got, about as much personality as a baseball bat. Okay. Um, it's fine. It's a tool. It's a tool to do the job. But I wouldn't look at it in a window and be like, wow, I can't wait to wear that on a special occasion. It's just, look, if I was in an adventure situation, or if I needed a sport watch for diving and I had nothing else and someone's like, here, I'd be like, oh, wow, this is great. This does the job. But in the vast ocean of competition, this watch does not distinguish itself in any way that would put it on like a top 30 list, right? So I don't really understand what Oris is trying to include along with this. We have an interview with VJ Geronimo from Oris USA soon where he talks about this. I don't think that he actually manages to explain why it's worth that amount of money. I mean, it looks like a perfectly competent watch that everyone says we don't want to spend that much money on. So it's sort of the answer to a question that people are not only not asking, but have said, no, we don't want that from you. They feel that they need to charge that, but as I've said to them, they now have the uphill battle of convincing not only us folks, but pretty much everyone else out there why the hard working brand for hard working people now expects you to spend a lot more than you ever thought you would or could, and that takes you into a lot of other territory. So yeah, sorry for the long response. I don't feel like I understand the value proposition anymore.
Any other brands finding themselves in this squeeze between the micro brands that can move quickly, create unique designs, excite people, and the top end businesses? Is Oris the leading proponent of being in the luxury squeeze at this price point? Are there other brands you think of? I think Formex maybe, or even
Formex, I think, is in a much better position, because what Formex does for $1,500 gives you a chronometer certified movement, a much more elaborate case architecture, and this entry price for a Formex is still under $1,000 for something in titanium even. So I think Formex is kind of more in that micro brand space where they can offer strong value for the money. I think Oris might be among the big ones. I think once you get a little bit bigger than them, you get, the luxury, how much is the brand worth? How much is Tag worth? And that's what makes an Aqua Racer worth what it is, not because it's so radically different than other dive watches. But I think Oris, they're big. They're at Watches and Wonders. They have a large booth. You see their ads places, yet they are in, I think, the toughest price point, because you have those brands like Tudor who are really, really aggressive in the affordable luxury segment. And then you've got all the Swatch Corp brands like Mito and Tissot barking right at their heels at right around $1,000.
As Ad, what do you think?
I gave it a maybe as well. And I do think Oris is really struggling to distinguish between what is its kind of entry level watches versus the higher end watches. Obviously, the Pro Pilots came in a couple of years ago, did reasonably well, not phenomenally, partly because of the way they wear. And as Kevin sort of mentioned, trying to distinguish between the different levels within your brand based on the movement is really difficult. So yes, I mean, I do think there should be more distinction. Maybe they should have saved these divers for the Solitas and left the others, the Aquis, for the higher end movement, and therefore you can clearly say, okay, this is your entry level watch, this is your mid tier, this is your higher end watch. Don't just mix it all up, because at that point you're basically saying to your customers that, frankly, yes, there is a difference between the movements, but they both do the same thing. They both tell you the time, and that's a bit of a problem when you're trying to charge double for pretty much the same part of the exterior of the watch. So yeah, it's a maybe for me. I think they need to really have a think about their lineup and their catalog in general.
Well, and then also, I think Kevin is bringing up a pretty good point. It at once everything else is so symmetrical, and obviously there's differences. The remaining difference becomes what you're now charging for the movement, and is the caliber 400 a $2,400 movement? That's a pretty strong ask when you're able to reduce it down that much. When one watch is a tangibly different offering, it's got a more complex case, all of that. Some of that can kind of get redistributed, but as Kevin mentioned, you hold up a 400 Aquis and you hold up a Solita Aquis, and across the room they're going to look identical. And that in hand, so much of them is that additional premium largely speaks to the movement. And they're not a brand like Rolex where they're like, well, you're going to pay for our movement. This is still a fairly unproven design, because it's a relatively new design. It hasn't been around long enough to the point where we can say, yeah, those things are problem free for 10 plus years, as they should be per their, the advertising material. It hasn't been around 10 years.